Hey, it's Amy Brown from The Bobby Bone Show. Join me in supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for a chance to win a trip to meet Megan Maroney at the 2025 iHeart Country Festival in Austin, Texas on May 3rd, hosted by Bobby Bones. We're going to hook you up with tickets, flights, hotel, food credits, and a meet and greet with Megan Maroney. Take action now to support St. Jude and help cure childhood cancer, and you're going to be entered for a chance to win. Visit iHeartCountryTrip.com to learn more.
Now the dark days are done, and the bright days are here. My sunny one shines so sincere, sunny one so true. I love you.
Thank you, Doc. Our next guest is one of those rare talents who has something to say and can say it funny. He's a writer-performer on the new Laugh-In and one of the most popular, outspoken, and entertaining personalities on the local news here in Los Angeles. He's won a half a dozen Emmys as a film critic and host of his own shows. Let's welcome Mr. John Barbour, right over there.
Thank you very much. The very first voice you heard was that of my wife singing Sonny with the legendary Joe Pass Trio, and the other was the iconic, legendary singer Francis Sinatra. This is the voice of John Barbour speaking to you from Las Vegas, Nevada, where it's still so hot and so humid that Jehovah's Witnesses are sending emails. The other day, I went to market to get something cool, and I hate to say this because it doesn't sound quite nice, but there was a very elderly lady in the market shopping for the same thing, watermelon and fruit and something like that, and she was wearing shorts, and what made it more unattractive was the varicose veins on her legs, and I got closer to her because I had to get closer to what I was trying to buy. And I noticed they weren't varicose veins, they were tattoos. And I see these things all over the place. Sometimes I wish I were a cartoonist, because if I were a cartoonist, I would draw this. I would have this guy absolutely covered in tattoos sitting at a tattoo artist chair. And the artist is leaning over him and saying to him, "What would you like this time?" And the customer says, "Something that looks like skin." I don't know what has gotten into or what has gotten on to people. And while I was at the market 2 days ago, Donald Trump was at a major function here in Las Vegas. He was speaking to 5,000 people, almost the number of people he's laid off. You know, the 1% love Trump, and the reason is he knows how to profit from bankruptcies and has had years of experience publicly and profitably firing people. And speaking of people who are out of job, you read, obviously, about a week ago, the FBI arrested this guy, Jared. He's been the 18-year spokesperson for Subway sandwiches. Well, they should have known from the beginning that there was something fishy about this guy, because whenever they asked him if he wanted turkey in his sandwich, he always said no, chicken hawk. But then again, speaking of somebody who went back to work, 2 days ago you also read that the major domo drug lord was arrested and locked up immediately in jail and escaped the following morning. The Mexican police put him in the cell where they'd already dug the tunnel. Oh, my goodness gracious. Oh, I came across something I think you get a kick out of. I just passed it on to you. Somebody sent it to me in my Facebook page. A wonderful quote from an American Indian chief about white folks and daylight saving times, which we have here in Nevada. The Indian chief said, quote, "Only a white man could cut a little off the top of a blanket, sew it on the bottom, and believe he has made it bigger. Is that classic? And now one for me. In America, truth is like Bigfoot. You hear it's there, but you have to hunt for it. But not with our guest tonight, thank goodness. The next voice you hear, you will unfortunately not hear much on the mainstream medium. It's the voice of an independent presidential candidate, which should be heard. He was born in Idaho. His boyhood heroes, of course, Davy Crockett and Walt Disney. Can't get any more American than that. He graduated from West Point and served with distinction in the military, attended USC, majoring in film, then graduated and did just that, produced successful television and films. However, as often happens in life, an accidental meeting with a survivor of the USS Liberty changed his life and politics forever. He has been marginalized by many in the establishment as almost un-American, as a fringe candidate, but his issues definitely are not. The real fringers are Trump and Jeb and Hillary, who talk about working harder or deporting Mexicans. This candidate gets to the heart of it, and you'll hear for yourself, thankfully. He is decidedly, constitutionally pro-American. His name is Merlin Miller. Merlin, welcome so much to the show. It's a delight to have you here.
Well, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be with you.
And folks, just before we go on the air, to make sure that we have contact with our guests, our engineer in California, Doug Newsom, contacts the guests, and we say hello to one another. I asked casually where he lived. He mentioned where he lived and the fact that he has 4 daughters. Merlin, would you tell me a little bit more about where you live? Tell me a little bit about your 4 daughters.
Well, they're all spread around right now, John. 3 of them actually ended up going to the military academy at West Point and are currently serving in the Army. And our 4th one decided not to follow the 3, but is working up in Boston right now for Raytheon. So very much a part of the military-industrial complex, which is a little uncomfortable for them and for myself. But they're independent-minded girls. They're great ones. We're very proud of them. And they got to travel quite a bit while we were growing up, and right now we're based here in East Tennessee, while they're pretty well spread around the world.
You know, that's absolutely astonishing because you're so articulate and outspoken about America's foreign policy. I mean, in the 70s, we had that illegal war because of Johnson's Tonkin Gulf resolution. Then we had the lying war in Iraq that Bush led us into, and your daughters lived in the house of the man who was pointing this out to the world, and still they went, as you said, just joined the military-industrial complex. What was it that they said to you, and what did you and your wife say to them when those 3 decided that they were going to go to West Point?
Well, at the time that they made their decisions, I was still very politically correct. This was about 2002 when I first met a survivor from the USS Liberty, and the next several years started going down rabbit holes of research. So it really wasn't until the youngest daughters were in the academy that I started really questioning things, and it became apparent to them that it was a little discomforting for them. But we have some interesting understandings. I do think a lot of people in the military right now feel as though the emperor has no clothes. They are learning the truths. I think that.
Hey, it's Amy Brown from The Bobby Bones Show. Join me in supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for a chance to win a trip to meet Megan Maroney at the 2025 iHeart Country Festival in Austin, Texas on May 3rd, hosted by Bobby Bones. We're going to hook you up with tickets, flights, hotel, food credits, and a meet and greet with Megan Maroney. Take action now to support St. Jude and help cure childhood cancer, and you're going to be entered for a chance to win. Visit iHeartCountryTrip.com to learn more.
They instinctively know things are very wrong with our country, yet they want to be proud of their service, of what they're doing. They want to think things with our country are not bad, but the reality is starting to seep through, and I think over the next few months, we're going to see a great awakening of patriots within the military.
Well, you said The emperor has no clothes, but years ago I made the observation, if the emperor has no clothes, you have to go one step further and arrest him for indecent exposure, which evidently the Justice Department and our government fails to do in many, many cases. Now, when you started going down the obscure rabbit hole of the USS Liberty, what was it that made you sort of go down there, that this survivor said to you, and what is it that you discovered that so altered your life and your life's direction?
Well, we were actually marketing a motion picture, a Western called Jericho, and I'd met a survivor who was in the distribution chain for an independent distributor. And I didn't really believe his story at first. It just seemed a little too bizarre. But he introduced me to a man who I got to know quite well, who introduced me to the crew. And I started going to a couple of the crew reunions. And unfortunately, this man that introduced me had produced a documentary called Dead in the Water. And unfortunately, he was killed on his way home from a reunion in 2007, at which time he had basically committed to becoming the executive producer for a motion picture project to tell the story of the USS Liberty and connecting that to modern day intrigues. So it was a devastating blow to us. But that experience, of course, led me down other paths and connecting other intrigues, political, military, and within the media, which I had been a part of.
Well, you have become an independent presidential candidate. So I'm going to start with a couple of, I guess, really tough questions for you. And the first question would be about two of probably the most successful, best known, and wealthiest men who tried to create a third party and enter the Oval Office were first Ralph Nader with the Green Party, and then Ross Perot, the billionaire from Texas. And Ross Perot was able to fund himself on television. And I remember very distinctly when he was on with Bill Clinton and George Bush, and he pointed out to the audience that if either one of these men is elected, you will see this economy destroyed because they're each going to sign NAFTA and send those jobs away. And then he backed out, but he still got about 21% of the vote. You do not have that name value. You obviously don't have those kind of finances. What makes you think you can get traction and do perhaps more than they did?
I think it's all a question of timing. I think, and I have great respect for both Ralph Nader and Ross Perot. And of course, they have capabilities far beyond much of my capability. But I think the time for the movement is here now. We've gone so far that our country is clearly on the precipice, and people are becoming aware of that. We can't sustain this much longer. And as a result, I think there's going to be a great awakening. Our economy is on the edge. We're continually involved in wars and occupations. We're losing our liberties here at home. We have an invasion of immigrants that aren't coming in legally. We just have so many things. And of course, a mainstream media that does not tell the truth. And people are starting to recognize that now. So it's all a question of timing, and not that I will have any success, because the odds are next to impossible. But if we can grow the movement, if we can do something, I do believe that there will be something coalesce out of this. And it could have happened years ago, I think, with Ron Paul's movement, but it's a question of timing.
Why do you think, again, Ron Paul, who could draw? I mean, Trump drew 5,000 people. When Ron Paul was here, he drew 15,000 people. He drew 3 or 4 times as many as any of the other presidential candidates, and that includes Obama. That includes Hilton. That includes all of the Bushes. He had the perfect opportunity to create a third party, and he could have probably won, and yet he scurried off. Why do you think he did that?
Well, I think it was a number of things he was evaluating. One was, of course, his age. I think there were family considerations. I was personally very disappointed. We organized a meetup group here where I lived and ran as a delegate for him. And in 2007, 2008, I thought that he had a perfect opportunity to form a third party or a coalition effort. And when it didn't happen, and I realized all the marginalizations would prevent any serious consideration by the Republicans, But he didn't do that. And then again, when the 2012 campaign started coming around, I knew that he would make that same decision. And I joined an independent effort to help form a new party at that time. And again, under the understanding that should Ron Paul in 2012 go independent and form a coalition effort or a new party, that we would join that effort. And again, we were disappointed that he didn't do that. I'm sure there are a lot of personal reasons why he didn't, and I think he probably still believes that there was the possibility of taking over the Republican Party, and he's put his efforts behind his son, Rand Paul, but I don't believe that is going to happen. I don't believe the powers that control the major parties will ever allow that without substantial compromise.
Well, you can see right now, the GOP has already announced that Trump will not be in the debates, and Ralph Nader was arrested by the police when he tried to break into the debates. The debating commission is a private commission. I mean, our airways are supposed to be publicly owned, and yet they're not. They're privately owned. If you became president, what would be the first thing that you would undertake to do?
Well, there's so many things that need to be done in parallel. One of the immediate things is I would stop these wars and these occupations. It's bleeding us, not only financially, but the blood of our young people and, of course, our reputation throughout the world. We need to get our country back on track, economically. We need to free our people up again. There's so many things that need to be done, at the legislative level. But bottom line, it comes down to shrinking government, decentralizing the power and the authority which the federal government does not have according to our Constitution. We need to shrink it.
Ronald Reagan ran on that platform about shrinking government, which got him elected, and yet government grew under him, under Bush, under Clinton, under Obama. The power of the government, and a lot of it secret, has grown like Topsy.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. And I know from a lot of people that I'm aligned with in the military-industrial complex, they're going to keep their head buried in the sand and let this monster continue to grow until it can't sustain itself. And I think we're very close to that time.
Well, going down that dark tunnel and speaking about trying to stop these illegal wars brings two thoughts to mind. One was the executive producer from the USS Liberty, who was unfortunately killed when he was about to become your executive producer. Then we get to John F. Kennedy, who was going to withdraw. He went on, talked to Walter Cronkite, said he was going to withdraw. There were 12,000 American advisors in Vietnam. He said he was going to withdraw 1,000 a month, and the Vietnamese would have to fight their own wars, even though we would supply them. He was gunned down in Dallas. Robert Kennedy was gunned down at the Ambassador Hotel when he was going to stop the war in Vietnam, and then he was going to further investigate the murder of his brother.
Hey, it's Amy Brown from The Bobby Bones Show. Join me in supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for a chance to win a trip to meet Megan Maroney at the 2025 iHeart Country Festival in Austin, Texas on May 3rd, hosted by Bobby Bones. We're going to hook you up with tickets, flights, hotel, food credits, and a meet and greet with Megan Maroney. Take action now to support St. Jude and help cure childhood cancer, and you're going to be entered for a chance to win. Visit iHeartCountryTrip.com to learn more.
Now, I ask you, you think if you or Ross Perot or Ron Paul or Ralph Nader ever gained enough traction and popularity to get the majority vote of the people in the United States, that they would live to take the oath?
Well, first of all, I hope that our characters would stand the test and we would go for the fight and try to do that. But no, I think it's virtually impossible for somebody to survive that would take that position today. Unfortunately, that's just the circumstance.
So now when you speak, you're an independent candidate. Is there a party with which you're affiliated now?
Yes, we're building the American Eagle Party, and we do have a website, AmericanEagleParty.com, which has a very basic platform, but it's based on our Constitution and reducing government and restoring our freedoms and basically the good reputation that America once had.
do you find that people are finding you almost metaphysically, even though you're not getting much or any airtime or mainstream media coverage? Do you find them finding you?
It's amazing that certain coincidences do happen, and we come in contact with people that I think are very, very critical to our success. So I want to believe that. Although when I go around the country and you look to speak, you learn to gain some traction somewhere in a local media, you just don't find it. The mainstream media is so absolutely controlled that the only support we get is in the alternative media.
The horrible thing about the media, when I started in the media and I first hosted the first morning news show on ABC in Los Angeles, a company could only own 7 television stations around the country. But Clinton changed all that. Now you have outfits like Clear Channel that own 1,500 radio stations. You have 95% of all American media in the hands of 6 corporations. Now, this is a real slippery slope. And it's very difficult to discuss because the truth is that a lot of these major corporations are headed by people with Jewish surnames. They are ultimately, most of them, Zionists. They are contributing to the state of Israel. Zionism is not a religion. It is a political movement, and a very, very cruel political movement. Judaism is the religion, and there are thousands of Jews around the world, religious Jews, who demonstrated what Netanyahu was doing to Gaza. I mean, even now they are intercepting peaceful flotillas from Europe, which are trying to bring food and medicine into Gaza. So how is it that you can be able to attack justifiably the control of the media by Zionists without being called an anti-Semite? And you know, Amy Goodman, who does the morning show Democracy Now! On PBS, had a very prominent Jewish politician from Tel Aviv on her show one morning a year ago, and that politician admitted to the fact that they use that as their very first weapon against anyone who criticizes not supporting Israel. They call him an anti-Semite. And it was a lady politician who said that. So how is it that you can verbalize that without sounding anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish?
Well, I think it's a charge we can't avoid. And, of course, at West Point, my best friend was Jewish. He was in our wedding. A friend from high school married a Reform rabbi I still correspond with. It's a ludicrous charge, but the facts bear out the fact that the Jewish community has been hijacked by the Zionist movement, which, in my opinion, was engineered by global financiers simply to control the power of the Jewish community to further their ends.
Well, do you sometimes feel like Don Quixote tilting against windmills?
Yes, but I do believe there's hope. I think there's a lot of American Jews today that are waking up to this reality. And as 100 years ago, most were opposed to the Zionist movement. I believe that's a growing movement again, and that could be the undoing of the rogue state of Israel and hopefully their domination over our political process and media.
Well, because the truth is, you could well understand any Jew standing up and saying never again. I mean, especially after the Second World War, and they were expelled from Russia, and they were expelled from Turkey, they were expelled from Germany, and in the Middle Ages they were not allowed to own property, so they could not become farmers. They couldn't grow their own food, so they became tradesmen. So it is understandable why they would be so angry at non-Jews. And it really is a very difficult thing that one has to do. And I am beyond understanding how they do it. I mean, my second favorite writer in America next to Mark Twain was a fellow named Ben Hecht. You probably never heard of him. He wrote a brilliant autobiography. He was a reluctant Jew. He didn't find out he was Jewish until the Second World War. He was Chicago's top newspaper man. He became a columnist in New York, a great playwright. He wrote Front Page. He wrote Gone with the Wind in 12 Days and never even read the book, highest paid screenwriter in America, and the first publicist for the State of Israel. And they named a ship after him. It was called the Ben Heck. He raised $1 million. 1,000 Jews from around the world boarded that ship and headed to Tel Aviv to fight against the British to free the State of Israel, or the area that they wanted to be Israel, against the British. And Ben Gurion, a Zionist, sank that ship with 1,000 people on it and blessed the cannons that killed his fellow Jews. And at that point, Ben Heck turned his back on Israel, saying that Ben Gurion has become the worst kind of human being. He has become a politician. So I can understand the quandary that you and many people who recognize face in trying to point out to America that Zionists control almost everything that they read about. And then again, look what happened to Cynthia McKinney. When congressmen and senators take an oath, when they take office, they do not swear in the Bible or the Constitution. They have a sign a pledge to support Israel. Cynthia McKinney refused to do that, and of course, look what happened to her. She's out of Congress. So now, if you're in and you're elected, how do you then tell these corporations that they have to divest?
Well, I'm a nationalist, and I believe in putting our national interests first. And as dealing with the Jewish community, they come from a historic mindset of feeling on one extreme that they're the chosen, that they're superior and special, at the other that they've been persecuted and are history's victims. And you take those two extremes, and that makes a very combustible mix. And I just think that that's something we have to try to educate people on so that they will assimilate and learn to put our national interests first.
Hey, it's Amy Brown from The Bobby Bones Show. Join me in supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for a chance to win a trip to meet Megan Maroney at the 2025 iHeart Country Festival in Austin, Texas on May 3rd, hosted by Bobby Bones. We're going to hook you up with tickets, flights, hotel, food credits, and a meet and greet with Megan Maroney. Take action now to support St. Jude and help cure childhood cancer, and you're going to be entered for a chance to win. Visit iHeartCountryTrip.com to learn more.
Same with these corporate interests. They're international minded. They have no loyalty to the state of America or to America, and our workers are suffering. Our entrepreneurs suffer. All these trade agreements, everything are designed for international interest rather than our own national interests.
Did you see there was a news report today that Elizabeth Warren may get the Glass-Steagall Act reintroduced? This was the act that was introduced by FDR during the Depression so that banks and investment houses wouldn't be able to gamble and do what they did to us in 2008, sending hundreds of thousands of Americans out of their foreclosed homes. That's something that's hopeful, and yet look at Elizabeth Warren is being soundly attacked by Wall Street.
Yes, it's anything that challenges the dominance of the system, you're going to be attacked and challenged. My only thoughts are that the system is coming to an end, and at some point in time, they've got to look for alternatives. So that spells opportunity, and in our current times, I think we may see some interesting strategies develop regarding that.
There are also news reports, Merlin, that the military is going to be reducing the number of their servicemen by over 400,000 people. And a lot of conservatives seem to be terribly upset by that. But it seems to me that the military-industrial complex, beginning with the Cold War, it seems to me, and a lot of economists and political philosophers have pointed out the fact that the Cold War may have even been a fraud, because if you have a couple of thousand men who are serving in the service and it's 1945 and the war is over, they can't come back and make toasters and television sets and radios and vacuum cleaners. What is it they're going to make? And that was all a fraud. So how do you tell your daughters who are in the military that if you become president, they may no longer be in the service?
Well, the numbers justify that, and I, like the founders, believe that we should have a very small standing army, if one, as the founders weren't sure we should have. But we're much too large. I mean, we certainly don't need to be positioned to police the world and be stationed in over 100 countries around the world and 800 bases. It's just way beyond what's necessary for protection of the American people. So I think they understand that, and of course they personally will not like to lose their positions. But we need to look for other positive, productive sources of diversion for these people that are currently serving the evils of destruction.
Do you get to speak very often to fairly large gatherings?
Very small. The largest gathering typically is about 200 people.
And what is their response? What kind of questions do they ask? And do they feel as hopeful as you?
I would say no. I think that there's probably a lot of disappointment in the patriot community. There's a lot of controlled opposition. There are a lot of agents provocateurs. There's a lot of things to frustrate people that want to stand up and do right. But bottom line, I have optimism. I do believe that we're making progress. And I think we need some sort of a catalyst to get people to stand up and feel that they can make a difference and that they aren't standing alone. I would love to go out and know that we could attract 1,000 people at a gathering and they would be passionately interested in the message. But there's too many distractions right now, and they feel a sense of hopelessness. And I'm trying to find ways myself to help turn that around.
And you're going to continue to try to do this, I presume.
Yes, I can't not.
Well, you say agent provocateurs. Do you know that the riots in Chicago in 1968 at the Democratic Convention were all started by agent provocateurs? We found out they're the ones that tore down the flags in the park. And the really sad thing to say about our government is that the only branch of the federal government that seems to be doing its job effectively is the Central Intelligence Agency. In 1970, at the church hearings, they discovered they had 1,000 assets working in all major media in the United States. Now, that's when they were fighting the Viet Cong, who were like supposedly real enemies. How many assets do you think the CIA has infesting every branch, every facet of American life, now that we're fighting phantom terrorists who do not exist?
Well, as long as they have the ability to print our currency, they can hire an army which is vastly superior to anything that we would think is necessary for us. And there is an enormous intelligence community, a shadow government, if you will. And I've recently been to Russia and a few times over the last few years to Iran. And I've witnessed the demonization and the forces that have been necessary to create that demonization on the ground. And it's just such a sad thing for me to experience. And somehow we have to get truth back to the American people that they are simply being led down the wrong path.
Well, Merlin, I must tell you, I admire you greatly for what it is you do. I have always, having been one myself, I always root for the underdog. And I guess my major American hero was District Attorney Jim Garrison, who tried to fight the fight against the federal government when he brought Clay Shaw to trial for conspiracy in the assassination of John Kennedy. And he said, one man armed with the truth is a majority. And Merlin, I would say you are a majority, and I thank you so, so much for being here, and the best of luck to you, the best of luck to your wife, and again, your daughters. Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you, John, and thank you for leading the fight for truth.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You're listening to BBS Radio. If it's not mainstream, it's on bbsradio.com.
Hi, I'm Richard Belzer, and this is the great BBS Radio.
Thank you for that smile upon your face. Oh, Sunny.
Hi, this is John Barbour. You may remember me as the co-host, producer, and creator of Real People, America's first reality show, or most recently as the writer-director of what's been called the definitive documentary on JFK's murder, The Last Word on the Assassination. Now I'm doing a show every other Monday from 5 to 6 Pacific Time on BBS. You'll hear provocative views, unreported news, and film reviews from me with outstanding guests and you. Join me on John Barbour's World.
Those of you who have an ongoing interest in the JFK assassination might want to know about this. TV producer John Barbour. He put together a dream team of JFK researchers, including Coast regular Jim Mars and world-class JFK writers Dick Russell and Joan Mellon. They all got together at UNLV in front of a live audience. They had a screening of Barbour's terrific and I'd say historic film based on interviews with prosecutor Jim Garrison of New Orleans. And then after the film was shown, the experts all talked about the latest JFK theories and evidence.
Hey, it's Amy Brown from The Bobby Bones Show. Join me in supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for a chance to win a trip to meet Megan Maroney at the 2025 iHeart Country Festival in Austin, Texas on May 3rd, hosted by Bobby Bones. We're going to hook you up with tickets, flights, hotel, food credits, and a meet and greet with Megan Maroney. Take action now to support St. Jude and help cure childhood cancer, and you're going to be entered for a chance to win. Visit iHeartCountryTrip.com to learn more.
It's now out on a DVD. Terrific stuff. I'm George Knack, Coast to Coast AM.
Welcome back, and I'd like to thank George Knapp for the wonderful unsolicited review about The Last Word on the Assassination, which you can find at Amazon. And if you happen to go there, you'll also might get a kick out of something John Barbour's Facebook book, Volume 1, Uncensored. It's sort of like chicken soup for the funny bone. You can open it any place and you'll find something, I guarantee, that'll make you laugh or make you angry. Anyway, thanks again for that. And now to one of my very favorite people. There is no one who speaks and writes about the economy as clearly and perceptively as my favorite and my only repeat guest. He's an Emmy-winning journalist who co-hosts every Friday one of the liveliest topical internet shows in the country and publishes a daily newsletter called News Vandal, which I never miss. From the Bay Area, Joe Satilli. Joe, thank you and so much for being on the show.
Yeah, and what an auspicious day. We've had the Greek deal. There's an Iran deal pending, and you were just talking about the future, America's future with Iran, a lot on at stake there. It does look like a deal is going to happen. Can you believe it, John?
Well, since the economy is Greek to me, and I saw that they were making a deal in Greece, why couldn't Greece, and I don't know what it is that they were doing, why couldn't Greece have done what Iceland did?
Well, because they are so intimately intertwined with the German economy. Look, this really is about Germany. This is about Germany's position as the lead dog in Europe and in the European economy. German unemployment is at about 5%. Greece's unemployment is at about 25%. So you can imagine their official figure is 25%. It's probably higher if you talk about underemployment and other things. And so what you have here is this situation in Europe where the euro starts in 2001, Greece joins, but you have an imbalance built into Europe. You have this powerhouse, incredibly strong economy in Germany, and then you have weaker economies that cannot compete in that same economic zone with with the German prowess inside that economic system. So, for example, a lot of what you have here, the irony is that Greece is taking loans from the people that gave them loans so that they can pay the people back who gave them loans with the money they are now being loaned.
Wow, how bizarre.
That's, in a sense, this is emblematic of how the sort of late stage capitalist international economic financial system works. And what's going on now with this deal that has been accepted by Prime Minister Tsipras of Syriza, a far left party. They kind of came in saying we are going to resist austerity. What austerity is, these are measures that are imposed upon an economy that's in crisis, where they are forced to give up some measure of their pensions to their retired, some measure of their social services in terms of what we would call in the United States welfare, what they call often in Europe the dole, medical care, public employment, all kinds of public services. And there was a desire.
Joe, did you happen to see Chris Hedges' article today in Truthdig about how America is now Greece?
No, I didn't. And there are fundamental reasons why that is true and why that is not necessarily true. You know, I'm not sure. What was his?
Well, he was talking about just what you were talking about. The unemployment numbers in this country are much higher than the government tells us.
They are.
A lot of people are looking to collect pensions that they will never collect.
That's true.
The cost of medical care means that they have to sell a house to get a kidney transplant. I mean, it's all out of whack. And he catalogs these economic disasters that a lot of us are looking at in the fading and sinking middle class. It is a wonderful article. I mean, it's akin to something that you would write.
Well, no, and these are all great points. I think the difference between the United States and Greece is that the United States has the dollar, and the dollar is backed by the full faith and credit of the military-industrial complex. And this is something that
you're going to say gold.
No. Well, this is the thing. If the dollar was, do you remember the silver certificate, John?
Yes, that John Kennedy authorized.
Right, silver certificate, and the idea was, and I remember my immigrant Italian father, he actually, one of his first jobs after teaching himself English coming to the United States was working for the Treasury Department, driving currency between the New York, New Jersey Treasury zone down into Washington, D.C. And I remember he had these silver certificates, and he used to tell me, you can take these anywhere and you can get the silver for this. I'm doing his sort of Sicilian accent there. And that actually meant something to people. Then, of course, we go off of the gold standard, and a silver certificate is a part of the gold standard, and it becomes a fiat currency, meaning it's not really tied to anything except for our perception of the value of it. And that was when Nixon, in light of the first Arab oil embargo about conflicts based around mostly conflicts with Israel, right?
Yes.
The war there that went on with Israel when the Arab nations attacked. Then you had the oil embargo. And Nixon cut a deal with the Saudis and said, look, this is what we'll do. If you promise to trade all your oil in dollars, we will guarantee your safety in perpetuity. We have a military protectorate. The blanket of the United States military comfort is over you. You can sleep at night knowing full well we will always be there, but you have to trade your oil in dollars. Thus was born petrodollars. So in a sense, the dollar went from the gold standard to an interesting combination of oil trading based specifically on Saudi Arabia's disproportionately large amount of oil that it can wield like a weapon on the global market, and on the military prowess that the United States has to back up the Saudis and, oh, by the way, punish anybody at will, it seemed at the time, although
Speaking of punishment, do you think some of that punishment was meted out to Saddam Hussein, who decided not to deal in petrodollars anymore?
Absolutely. You know, there are things about we forget. It's funny when we're going to have a little nostalgia going into this election, because I think Bernie Sanders' rise, notwithstanding I cannot see any way in which, unless Hillary is caught in bed with a Girl Scout, that she is not going to get the nomination. I
Well,
think,
speaking of that, put that on pause a second. You see where Yoko Ono said she had an affair with Hillary back in the
yeah, that turns out
70s?
to. I think that turned out to be a satire news site.
Oh,
So
okay. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah.
Thank
Yeah, well, this is welcome to the internet. I mean, I'm getting these all the time where people say, "Hey, can you tell us? You're the news vandal. Is this a story? Is that not a story?" And I have to, oh my goodness, because there's so many of these sites that want to be the Onion, but they don't tell you at the top that they're trying to be the Onion, and they end up going viral on the internet. But
Oh, God.
what Saddam was, if you go to the end of the Clinton administration, and I will tell you this right now, Bill Clinton made the Iraq War possible. Without Bill Clinton's intransigence in the face of UN inspectors who were finding that basically Saddam was in compliance, and perfectly timed with a lot of Monica Lewinsky hoo-ha, a massive bombing campaign that forced the inspectors to come out on the eve of really them, led by Scott Ritter at the time, UN inspector, former U.S. Marine and lead inspector for the UN, was going to essentially certify, look, Saddam's in compliance, because, by the way, many of the weapons he had prior to the Gulf War would have become inert over time. So even if they didn't find all the weapons, many of the weapons he would have had would have no longer been viable weapons because they have a shelf life, and their shelf life was passing. At that time, oil was trading, at the end of the Clinton administration, oil was trading between $11 and $17 a barrel. Wow. And because his oil had stayed in the ground over the course of those sanctions during the Clinton years, the percentage of the world's proven oil reserves that Saddam had by the time you got to the end of the 90s had actually gone from being like 5th, 6th, or 7th to 2nd to the Saudis. And what he wanted to do, because he believed that the Saudis were part of a conspiracy with George Herbert Walker Bush, who was essentially his paymaster for many years. He was one of Herbert Walker Bush's guys, in a sense, and he felt betrayed because he thought when he went into Kuwait that was going to be his reward for attacking Iran at the behest of the incoming Reagan administration. Boy, what a tangled web we weave, don't we?
Yeah, now, since you brought up Iran, at the very top of the show you said we're going to have what looks like a deal with Iran. What would that deal be? And do you think that it will be approved, or do you think that Netanyahu will sabotage it?
Well, and Netanyahu, it doesn't even need to be Netanyahu. You have these yahoos in Congress, guys like Senator Tom Cotton, who sounds like somebody out of a Sinclair Lewis novel, who these guys are so itching for war. And then you have the wild card is Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, who has been indicted by the Justice Department. Some people think in retaliation for his opposition to an Iran deal. So he's going to be very much against any kind of Iran deal. But we got to see the text of it. But I could tell you this: all of the assessments that I've seen, everything that I have read says that this is going to essentially stop the ability of Iran to break out with a nuclear weapon. Now, the breakout period may be 8 months, 12 months, 13 months, or whatever, but the bottom line is that a lot of insiders in the foreign policy establishment say, yeah, Iran's going to win this because they're going to give up a nuclear weapons program that they actually never committed to having in the first place.
Exactly. Do you think that there would have been an invasion of Iraq?
No. They have these massive bunker buster bombs,
yeah.
And I think really the worst fear on the part of the administration was Israel flying a solo airstrike. Now, the real
they've
problem,
already done that in the past.
Yeah, well, there were. See, it's a different ball of wax now because Iran is not Iraq. In a sense, what Iraq proved to the world was that if you don't have weapons of mass destruction, you are a sitting duck.
Exactly.
If your army has been decimated by 12 years of bombing by the world's largest military power, you are an easy target. Iran is not Iraq. Iran does not have the sectarian divides, does not have the kind of easily exploitable divisions that you can use to conquer it quickly the way shock and awe did. If you get into a war with Iran, you better be ready for the long run, particularly since 2/3 of the population is under the age of 35, which is both why a deal should happen because they are young, they are often tech savvy, and Iran could be the beating heart of an economic renaissance in that part of the world. And ultimately, if you want to control Afghanistan, you want to control Iraq, and you want to battle ISIS, Iran has the keys to that kingdom.
Okay, back to the you said economic renaissance, Greece. I could understand. Was it John Perkins who wrote The Economic Hitman?
Yes, it was, and he actually, I think, wrote or at least was interviewed about Greece and said the economic hitmen have struck again.
How could they have done that? I mean, what resources would Greece have that we could that we could blackmail or intimidate them?
Well, here's it's funny that you say that, John, because how about airports, electric infrastructure, their electric system, banks? There is basically now, as a part of this deal, a 50 billion euro liquidation fund in which public assets are going to be liquidated, in other words, sold to private companies to pay off the debt that, oh, by the way, every analysis I've seen, even though they're going to get this new bailout deal, the bailout deal means they will never be able to pay off the debt anyway. All this is going to do.
Hold it. You mean to tell me that Euro Disney might own the Parthenon?
It's a small world after all.
Oh my God! How horrifying!
So this is where the Greek people are. Is they're saying we are the Greek people. We are this old civilization. We have this long history, and here we have the Germans. And this is one of the things that Prime Minister Tsipras and the Syriza party were saying over and over again. You know, we've never gotten reparations for what the Germans did during World War II here in Greece. Oh. And oh, by the way, when the beginning of the European community started after World War II at the behest with money from the Marshall Plan, the United States, and the behest of NATO planners, idea of a cooperation for Europe, a lot of debts were essentially forgiven for Germany in addition to their reparations. And maybe there should be some equilibrium. And here's where I think the comparison of Greece and the United States is a little bit off for Chris Hedges. The difference between the EU and the United States is that, John, you've heard this many times, and listeners have heard this many times, the blue states pay for the red states. If you take California and New York alone, the amount of taxes they generate often ends up paying for the food stamps, the welfare, the Medicare, and the Social Security of people in the red states who for some reason tend to vote against those programs and revolt against them and think that the blue states are the takers. Well, when the blue states are actually, that federal money is going into the red states. That's been shown a number of times. And that's the difference between the United States and Europe.
Aren't we also doing in this country what you say is happening to some of the infrastructure in Greece, only it's not maybe our infrastructure, but our...
Hey, it's Amy Brown from The Bobby Bones Show. Join me in supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for a chance to win a trip to meet Megan Maroney at the 2025 iHeart Country Festival in Austin, Texas on May 3rd, hosted by Bobby Bones. We're going to hook you up with tickets, flights, hotel, food credits, and a meet and greet with Megan Maroney. Take action now to support St. Jude and help cure childhood cancer, and you're going to be entered for a chance to win. Visit iHeartCountryTrip.com to learn more.
Public parks and our public lands. I keep reading stories all the time about massive hunks of these areas which belong to us and belong to the Indians are being sold to private companies overseas.
Oh, no, John. We don't do anything like actually sell them. We actually make it better for the people who want to exploit those resources on public lands. Instead of having them actually own it, which would then turn it potentially into a liability in the long run should they despoil it, We just have them lease it. Here, have a really cheap lease. Extract all the resources you want, pay us a little fee, and then you can walk away and we'll own the liability of the gigantic Superfund mess you leave behind. It's actually even worse.
Are you kidding?
No. This is when you see leases, and this is actually something that has caused many environmentalists to be on the other side of President Obama. A lot of the fracking is happening with leases opening up on public lands. And this is, it is not a coincidence that Dick Cheney comes from Wyoming. Wyoming is the mining capital of America, and Wyoming is the place where mining companies can get leases. There are some leases that if you locked in the lease 35 years ago, you're paying like $1.95 an acre to lease a piece of land and extract all of the mineral resources you want out of it. And
why isn't there more of an outrage about this?
Because Kim Kardashian has a very large behind. It's very large, John. I mean, I'm going to tell you, it takes up a lot of the screen space on a television news broadcast. And if you want to squeeze in like mining rights somewhere around that large set of buttocks, it's a challenge. Even with 16 by 9.
And the other story that I read, and I only read it for one day, was that Puerto Rico's problems might be more hazardous to the United States in general than Greece's problems.
Absolutely. Look at Greece. First of all, China just had an epic stock market correction, lost $3 trillion at one point of its stock market value in just under 3 weeks. It's around 2.1 trillion. So let's just say, I don't know how the market performed today in Shanghai, but the last thing I saw going into this morning was 2.1 trillion in losses. That's the equivalent of like 9 Greece economies.
Oh,
that's Greece 9 times over. China lost in 3 weeks. So Greece is less than 2% of the European economy. Meanwhile, Puerto Rico, they have a $72 billion outstanding liability. They can't file for bankruptcy because they are not actually a state. They're in this nebulous zone of being a territory. And what happened in Greece is, in spite of the fundamentals, what happened in Puerto Rico is in spite of the fundamentals, a lot of investors around 2006 went into Greece, even though they had high unemployment and a massive brain drain where I keep saying Greece. But the funny thing is Greece and Puerto Rico are the same. Greece has had a brain drain and bad fundamentals, and Germans and others went in and loaned money to Greece. In Puerto Rico, you had a brain drain where young people were leaving Puerto Rico, coming to the United States because there were no economic opportunities. But investors went into Puerto Rico because there was a tax break trifecta there. Bonds, public bonds, municipal bonds, and bonds for public corporations, right? Privately held bonds. You could get a tax break by investing in those bonds, investing in that debt there. So basically investors said, hey, who cares if the fundamentals are great? Let's go take advantage of this tax break by floating money to Puerto Rico. Well, they can't pay it back because the fundamentals did not dictate it was a good investment. Simply the desire of investors in the short term to get a short-term tax break flooded them with debt. Now they can't pay for the debt. As the economy continues to go into a deeper crisis because of this debt, more and more people flee. The economy continues to collapse like a badly made souffle, which is exactly what happened in Greece.
Well, if American banks and Wall Street bankers lose on the Puerto Rican bonds, will taxpayers in this country once again have to bail them out, or should they go out of business, which should happen in a free enterprise system?
Well, that's the thing. We don't have a free enterprise system. It's funny. I mean, I know you know that in saying that was a leading question, and a perfectly leading question. And it's so interesting to me that I've seen now from longtime free marketeers who were Reaganites in the 80s who talked about, we have to unleash the free market, the invisible hand. And the invisible hand seemed to me does that make us a puppet? Is the invisible hand up our backside telling us what to do? they're now talking about crony capitalism, and they're saying that regulation causes crony capitalism. But I think at this point, all capitalism has turned out to be crony capitalism, regulation or not. Regulations are really just opportunities in this situation. Things like the Dodd-Frank bill that was passed, these supposedly these difficult regulations. I've been through Dodd-Frank. I've written extensively about it. All it did was create a whole nother group of loopholes and new exotic financial instruments that bankers could create in response to these new so-called regulations that, oh, by the way, all the major banks, when these regulations get passed, let's just say the law gets passed in Congress, they then go to a giant burled walnut boardroom table. They sit around and they have to write the actual rules. You have the law that's passed, but then the Department of Justice and the SEC have to write rules that get implemented. And guess who they consulted when they were writing the rules? Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and said, hey, we're writing these rules. We want to make sure that you guys know how to comply and we get this compliance down. So why don't you help us write the rules?
Well, the bottom line question is, I guess it's on everybody's mind with what's happened in China and Greece and Puerto Rico and the leasing of our public lands here. What do you foresee another 2008 here in the United States?
Look at Uber, look at Airbnb, look at
what is Uber?
So Uber is the ride-sharing service that basically it's an app, and instead of taking a taxi, you can get some individual, because of a massive amount of underemployment and unemployment, the workforce participation rate, that means the percentage of people in the workforce who are of working age actually engaged in work is at its lowest level since 1977, which, John, you will remember was the beginning of a very deep recession in the United States. They're taking advantage of this giant pool of labor, people with cars and nothing to do, and you hire them through this website to get a ride. They're worth $41 billion.
Oh, my.
Airbnb, which is a website that allows you to rent people's rooms, basically turning them into little mini hotels, that's worth $21 billion. And these things are called unicorns. Unicorns are tech companies that are worth at least $1 billion, but either have no revenue and they are pre-IPO. Their valuation is based solely on investors putting money into it before it's ever actually become an official company on the stock exchange. And if these things start to collapse, that's going to be the thing that starts to trigger the popping of the next bubble. We are in a bubble. It's just a matter of what's going to pop it. I do not think it's going to be Greece, though.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Well, where on Fridays can people listen to you and your co-host? Because it is just a fabulous show, and you guys do a wonderful, wonderful job.
Yeah, thank you. It's called Inside the Headlines with the News Vandal, and that's me and James Moore on KRUU-FM. Just type in KRUU-FM. It's out of Iowa, but it's available worldwide on the Internet, and we do it at 2 p.m. Pacific, and we do it live. It's a live show, 1 hour, and unexpurgated. It's harrowing, but it's fun.
Oh, you guys do a wonderful job with the show. And your News Vandal, which I get every day and I send out to my friends every day, is by far the best newsletter I have ever seen. I mean, I prefer it over the Drudge Report or anything else. And how can they get that?
Just email me at info@newsvandal, NEWSVANDAL.com. That's info@newsvandal.com, and you'll get it Monday through Friday. And read them and weep.
Okay, if you have one last thing that you'd like to say to the audience before you go to the bar, what would it be?
Order a double.
Yeah, what would it be?
Order a double.
Well, Joe, thank you again, and you must come on once a month at least to do this, because you are absolutely fantastic at what it is you do. Again, thank you so much. Have an absolutely fabulous weekend, and I'll talk to you privately later next week.
Thank you, John. You're so kind.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you all for listening. Have a great weekend. See you in a couple of weeks. Bye now.
You're my spark. precious fire. You're my sweet, complete desire. A sunny, 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 I love you. I love you.
Hey, it's Amy Brown from The Bobby Bones Show. Join me in supporting St. Jude Children's Research Hospital for a chance to win a trip to meet Megan Maroney at the 2025 iHeart Country Festival in Austin, Texas on May 3rd, hosted by Bobby Bones. We're going to hook you up with tickets, flights, hotel, food credits, and a meet and greet with Megan Maroney. Take action now to support St. Jude and help cure childhood cancer, and you're going to be entered for a chance to win. Visit iHeartCountryTrip.com to learn more.